As Louise said, I think we've had a couple, I think, of these action learning sets where we allowed conversation to extend around each, which meant that some people didn't get enough floor time. So I think we'll be quite strict with the times per project. And I'm going to ask Louise to use her timer and all the rest of it. That would be fantastic. I think the other thing to say is that is with these action learning sets, the clue is in the name. They are about they're about action, and it's the actions that you have brought. They don't have to be successful, because there's as much learning from things that have been difficult or haven't worked as there is from things that have worked. So there's absolutely no pressure to try to say everything is in the garden is rosy, because we know that these are complicated, wicked problems which you are dealing with. And we all learn from the material that you provide. So it's the learning that we want from using your input as the real catalysts. And we're particularly interested in the actions that you have undertaken, whether successful or not, where the aim has really been about changing the experience of citizens. So not so much the actions internally, but actually the actions, what's really made a difference? What have you really tried to do that changes something for citizens in your community in relation to the issues that matter to them? That's really what we're trying to do, because I think the system is great at writing reports, writing plans, writing strategies that then don't actually, writing the plan isn't the work. The work is actually what happens on the ground, and increasing the proportion of stuff that we do that makes a difference on the ground is part of what we want to learn from all of this. And I just, in terms of order, I know that Newham had said that they may not be able to stay to the end, so I thought we might start with them. But also see Claire, is that from Bristol? You're also limited time. So would people be happy if Newham and then Bristol are the first two that we start with? Anybody objecting to that? And I'll take silence as a no. And we'd love to hear. Now, this is particularly really update since the last time in March. And I think I'm going to hand the floor over to Bristol. Also, just to say, Paul is working with me. I think many of Paul's contributions may come via the chat today. I think following impacts post surgery and things. I think that's right, Paul. But do feel free to chip in, and also anybody as we go through, feel free to put comments in the chat. If you want to speak, raise your hand, all that sort of stuff, and or bring you in. And so Newham, do you just introduce your team that you've got here with us, remind us what the project is, and then tell us what you've been up to. So the Newham team, you may need to unmute yourselves.
Hi everyone. I'm one half of today's Newham team. Emma's the other. Emma is on the move. Emma, should we see if we can hear you?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Okay.
We can.
Great.
Emma's actually on the move, about to give a workshop as part of our project. Do you want to introduce it?
Yeah, I can introduce us. So yeah, I mean, the Newham project is led by Newham Council, and Natalie and myself are partners to the project, not part of Newham Council. So I am from the Association for Young People's Health, and I guess why we're here is because the project is specifically focused on food security for 11 to 19-year-olds. So what we've been doing is looking at taking a systems approach to how we tackle this problem in Newham, and we're focusing specifically on schools, so secondary schools, and also on youth settings as well. And the work on secondary schools is a little bit further along the line than on the youth setting side. And I guess the most kind of recent update since last time, I don't know if this had happened when Anne Hager was at the meeting last time, was that we had we've run youth engagement in schools to understand young people's perspectives on food security, how food works in schools, what works well, what are the challenges, and what they feel are the solutions, the potential solutions to that. And we've brought those perspectives along with the feedback from all of the other stakeholders to a session earlier on this year around school in food in secondary schools, and we're now looking at particular pieces of work to unpack some of the issues that we identified. So something around school curriculum, something around food growing, and the third one around economic incentives around food, which I think is the issue that Anne brought last time. So that is a bit of a summary. Is that enough, Natalie? Shall I pass back to you?
Sounds great, thank you. Yes. We had a chat in the last couple of weeks amongst the whole team and amongst Emma and I about what would be one of the most knotty things that we're working through at the moment, that we'd really value some feedback on from all of you, and some insights and possibly some comparisons. So to give you a bit of context, as Emma suggested, when we first started out, we were looking very broadly at food security amongst 11 to 19-year-olds. And the first system map that we did on that was looking at just that, the drivers of food insecurity in that age group. And as Emma also said, we've honed in on schools as a place where the food offering can make a huge difference to young people. Mainly of our focus is on food security, but obviously by extension there's a health element. So we're looking at schools. We've got fantastic engagement. You know, the council is so dynamic, and there are some really respected relationships across, well, down from the mayor, really, isn't it, Emma, through one of our colleagues on the project, Andy Gold, who's head of food strategy at Newham. And then they've already got very strong relationships with the schools. That was started, I think, really with the strong relationships with primary schools. Newham's one of the few councils to offer free school meals throughout primary school, early on. So in terms of secondary schools, we've been honing our mapping and looking at, what happens within secondary schools, what drives the food environment there. And the thing we feel a little bit, I was going to say stuck on, I guess we're stuck. It's difficult to get our heads round, and I think this is the case with pretty much everything that anyone works on, is how do you navigate the area that you're looking at, both geographically and topic wise, and situation wise. How do you navigate how you can affect that in relation to what's going on more nationally? So if Newham is trying to make a difference in secondary schools to the offering that's given to young people, how do we account for many, many other factors? And the particular focal point that we've really got stuck on is this idea that schools are, well, they're really struggling financially, aren't they? And so when they are struggling financially, how do we start trying to get them to expand the food offering or improve the food offering and think like that? So So yes, I guess our question to you is, how are you all, or how would you advise really trying to examine what we're trying to do, which is the school offering food offering in schools, when it's contingent on national policies and central government? You know, what is in our gift to act on, given what else is going on in the wider system? And actually, we've had a bit of an underspend, so we're commissioning a piece of work where someone's going to look at this tension between schools, say, wanting to make money about things going, you know, related to food. I mean, the classic is, say, vending machines, but actually that not being in line with healthy food policy. So how do we manage and deal with, I guess, those nested systems when many of the issues are very much influenced by things beyond that issue? Does that make sense?
It does. Are there things that you've done that have either, that in attempt to address that either have worked or haven't worked? It was just as a starting point.
Not yet, but it's very, very much in process, isn't it, Emma? I mean, the council, the food team and the education people are working together, are talking. They're one of, I think there are other London boroughs also doing this, but not many, really thinking, hang on a sec, is it actually beneficial to be rolling out free school meals at secondary level, beneficial from the point of view of food security and health for young people? And is it ultimately cost effective is one of the big questions asked. So we haven't, none of that has been done yet, but we've got, Emma, you're probably better to answer what's already in train in the schools in terms of action.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we are, it's this kind of tension between, we absolutely, there's a team that's really ambitious to make sure that those things aren't, you know, that we can think big and we can think about how we can link into these broader systems. But there is a part of what we've got to do is actually, you know, deliver something concrete. So it's that we're managing all of the time. What we're able to do within this piece of work and how that butts up against everything else. And so I mean, the bit of the work that I lead is the conversation, the engagement with young people around this, and young people themselves, you know, absolutely come back with all the same issues that we face with it, that they see this food within the broadest context. And so I guess we're making small steps, and I think we've got some good engagement in the schools. But as we move forward, we can see, and as we're looking at the interventions that we're thinking about, we can see that this coming up more and more, I guess.
So can just trying to get to the granularity, you mentioned engagement with young people. What is it that they want, and what are the specifics of the interventions that you would like to be able to deliver? If you just do that, and then Karen's got a question.
It's fine. You've just asked the question I was going to ask anyway about the interventions. It's fine.
Okay.
Take it down.
So what the young people want is good food in school. They want particularly culturally appropriate food that and I can give you all kinds of, I won't do now, but I'm sure separately we'll be sharing all of the exact things that the young people said that they wanted, but also spaces in food where spaces in schools where they can have time to eat sufficient food in a place which is, you know, not actually a huge ask really, which is kind of comfortable, not in the rain, for example. They have enough time. They're not at the back of the queue. So their asks are relatively simple around the way in which they want to have food provided to them in school. And they are actually quite sceptical about free school meals in some regards. So that is something that's definitely come up in the engagement, that is actually quite difficult for young people to imagine the possibility of a free school meal at secondary school, and they can think of all the problems that might incur. So the session that I'm doing today is unpacking some of that with a different school about what might be some of the solutions. And I guess the interventions is that we've got we will have a staff member going into schools, working with the governors and working with the senior leaders in the schools to think about how we can work towards the school being seen as a food haven. And so that is a whole range of things that will be slightly different according to each secondary school. So some of that may be around, some of that will be around looking at free school meal models that could happen in secondary schools, but also linked into food growing strategies, into what is in the curriculum for food, and having quite a bespoke look at how that can play out in a number of different secondary schools in Newham.
And so the intervention, so just paraphrasing what I think I've heard, the young people themselves, they want culturally appropriate food and somewhere to eat it without being rained on, where they can sit down, sort of thing. Is that
well, yeah, as always, if you ask young people a question, they come back with a very sensible answer, which is that they want to have a kind of what we would all want is a space to eat food that is and good food that is appropriate for them. Yeah, and what we're trying to do is say, well, okay, this is the solution is not just let's provide free school meals but it's actually to look at the whole school and to think about how the leadership in the school can make those kind of things happen via a number of different routes.
And also, you touched on it, Emma, but the timing in the school day around eating and time to eat, it's like eating is just not really, high on the agenda anywhere in school, understandably. There's more than enough that they're trying to do in the school day, but we've also got quite a bit of data that we've bounced off from primary schools. There's a lot of pushback on the nature of timing of meals and who gets what, depending on where you are in the queuing system, and also in relation to break time. So all these things that actually might sound quite minor, but are really, really important to the young people wanting to have their lunch, have time to have their lunch, also have time to play with their friends, talk to their friends, obviously playing less so in secondary, but hanging out.
And just clarifying, so I heard you say that the young people themselves were sceptical that the school would provide this free school meals. And so is there any idea as to where that food would come from and how it would be paid for? Were they saying we want to bring our own food in and be able to eat it somewhere, and if we could, or when you talk to young people, did you have a view as to where the food was coming from, who would provide it, how it would be provided? Is it the content of the vending machines? Is it stuff they bring themselves? Is it stuff from school kit? What was their expectations?
So they mostly talked about, we were mostly talking about food that was being prepared and delivered from it at school. So it wasn't food that they were bringing in, but they were particularly talking about the food offer in the school, and where that was and how that was provided, and definitely there are different in the conversations, not necessarily with young people, with schools, there are different levels of connection in different schools between the school food provider and the school, and how much ownership and relationship there is between the school and the school food provider is really, really important to how kind of changes may be made. But that's what the young people were specifically talking about, and how that works, and what were the positives about that, but what were some of the real challenges.
And so the interventions, are you talk us about the interventions, whether they're about how do you create free school meals, which doesn't sound like it's top of the list, or how do you improve the dialogue between the school and the school provider so it's more responsive? And then Karen again.
Well, it's a kind of broader thing. It's kind of a bespoke look at different schools and how we maybe some of them they may be testing out how we can deliver free school meals within an intervention, and in others it's looking at how they might want to increase food growing. The things about food, the spaces is trickier because of the constraints of the building, but there is definitely more space to look at the timing of the school day and what else happens at lunchtime. So, for example, not kind of programming in a lot of other things at lunchtime. So the interventions are going to be different depending on which schools, and they're going to be worked on with somebody who goes in and works with the governors and the senior leadership to ensure that they can fit in with the particular school system that we're working in.
Karen.
Just a couple of things, really. It's just a comment on. I am a vice chair of governors myself, so I do know that it is something that they have that gift to do. You know what I mean? To do the things that you've got to do. I suppose it depends whether it's an academy or not, but yeah, there's a lot of things that they can do. But Kerry just made a point, so I can't take praise for it. But about is the I know you're talking a lot about schools here, but where is the consideration done with the education starting at home and the parents, what parents do to contribute to this and that? I'm sure that's probably something else, but like with I know you're talking about within the school day and the preschool meals and everything, but is there anything, that the parents could support with?
That's obviously a hugely important point, so thank you. What we are doing here is, I mean, as you can imagine, it's been very hard to not blur the line between food security and healthy eating. In fact, we spent a lot of time thinking about this, certainly towards the beginning of the project. And while undoubtedly everything that goes on in the home is crucial in a young person's food intake, what we decided to do was to focus on an area which certainly until recently has had very little attention. And our main focus of our project is food security. And we see that, what's come out of early conversations in the first in the development stage and in the first sort of phase of the project is that the school is a potential site to make a lot of difference, and also to help sort of iron out huge inequalities, because you give an offering, and certainly if we're talking about free school meals, everyone can take it up and get a meal, even if things at home are struggling. So I'm not sure when you say home, you're thinking more along the lines of fostering good practice.
Yeah, I think that's what we were thinking, more on the healthy eating and things like that. So you did explain that really well.
Yeah, a little bit, but then because obviously it was my train of thought, but then also as well, like looking at them wider determinants at home, what are the reasons around them having to have preschool meals? Is there anything like obviously finding out what then the wider effects are within these children's lives, of the reasons why parents and themselves are struggling in that way, to feed back to them to the wider system, because this could obviously go wider, couldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, so the schools is kind of the first place that we're working in, but we also want to work in youth spaces as well. And part of that is to think a bit more broadly about how that works. But that's just work is at an earlier stage, and arguably will kind of have some bigger differences because of the bigger challenges, I guess, because of the challenges that the youth services are under. But certainly at the very early part of the work, we really looked at how food worked for teenagers and how that's different for younger younger children, so that was thinking about how family contacts work for young people, but also the relationship between food and peer relationships, which are increasingly important for this age range. And so that we for that bit we looked at a number of profiles of young people that brought together all of the different things that we'd heard from the work that we'd done, and what we've been doing with the engagement is taking those profiles, so they're kind of imaginary young people that kind of highlight all of the different things that we learned from the engagement, and we've been taking those profiles back to other groups of young people in schools and other places to really check in that they are valid and that we are basing this whole piece of work on that broader context and on how food is working for young people in their broader lives. So they looked at things like family, they looked at the economic circumstances of parents, they looked at where young people were accessing food, whether or not they were eating breakfast, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Excellent. Emily, and then there's a comment from Paul in the chat to pick up.
Right, thanks. I won't take long. I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, Natalie, when you asked the question about what's within our gift and what, thinking about the drivers of food insecurity and how much of that is a national debate rather than a local debate, and how we're quite at a local level. We can only really place our energy into things where we think we can have impact. And I was wondering about free school meals. Locally, our discussions are around those children who are eligible for free school meals but aren't claiming them, and those children who are just over the threshold, and how we can support those families because the threshold is so low for free school meals. So I just wondered if that's something that your team is looking at as well, thinking about things like auto enrolment, so those families who are eligible but for some reason aren't claiming them, if you can encourage the uptake there, and also if there's any initiatives you could take to support those families who are just over the threshold.
Well, I mean, the way Newham are pushing forward at the moment is their ambition is to replicate what they've got going on in the primary schools, which I know is going to be rolled out across the whole of London in the autumn, but that's to have it universally available. I haven't been involved in the discussions around the cost and things. Unfortunately, the person that's most up to date on all of that and has the best relationships with the schools isn't here, Andy, but that would obviously get rid of that issue, Emily. And I've seen Paul's comment. Absolutely, you're so right. Paul's sort of saying that, go with the school leaders that are sort of on your side to begin with. And what seems to be really exceptional in Newham, not exceptional, but really good and not entirely usual, is that there are some really, really engaged schools who are absolutely up for these conversations, really keen to be pilot schools. The food strategy team in Newham seems to have an incredibly high profile and be very dynamic in terms of pulling people along with its enthusiasm. So yes, we've definitely got some school leaders who are on board, and I think that as far as I know, they're sort of just actually looking into how and when they're going to start the piloting rather than if. Is that right, Emma?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the importance of the engagement has been to highlight that if you're going to make such a big change as making those free school meals universal for secondary, it's not as simple as saying, well, here's the money, let's put it in. There's a whole lot of thinking about how that is going to work for young people, what young people feel is going to be the way in which that will be practicable. There is a whole lot of practical things around the suppliers and around the way in which you kind of ensure that you have sufficient food, but you don't have too much food waste. And we're looking at other boroughs that have tried this. So there's been a trial in Hammersmith and Fulham as well. So looking at the learning from other pieces of work. So that's definitely an ambition, and I think linked to Paul's point, we are definitely doing that. And I guess thinking about how via the networks of leaders in schools, we can kind of support a bit of momentum around this, where schools really want to be part of this movement to be a food haven and to think about food in a much more holistic way for all of their students. But I think it's that definitely is the right, to go with the leaders who really get it, and then to try and build the momentum from there.
Fantastic. So I think we're coming towards the end of your 25-minute slot. I mean, it's been really interesting conversation. Can I just, has anybody got any other suggestions for Newham that they wanted to share at this stage? So I don't see any new hands. Again, I think there's it's a theme we picked up last time, was the link, but is what starting with one thing is what's in one's control. You often open up into a bigger area like poverty more generally against what sometimes is deteriorating rather than improving context. So there's a problem there. I think I would just note that in the last 48 hours or so, I think I've seen national debate with Keir Starmer and others about free school meals and things. So there may be links in there to join up with. We've got the segmentation of schools that are in line with this versus those that perhaps aren't. Some relatively low cost interventions potentially, like around space and using estate. I don't know that the links with providers and the sharing of good practice from both within and beyond. So there seems to be there's lots going on and lots of potential avenues. So it feels to me that you're well poised to move this forward. I don't know whether we've added anything that you didn't know already, but I think others will have learned as well from you. So thank you both very, very much, and good luck with we look forward to the next steps of progress. But it's great to hear the different levels of which you're using the engagements and take things forward. Brilliant. So let's move on to Bristol. I think it was Claire. I think you were saying you also have to go relatively early. So let's give you the next 25 minutes or so. And anybody else, introduce yourself, anybody else from your team, remind us what you're doing, and then your progress and the granularity of the actions, good and bad, or effective and less effective, perhaps rather than good and bad.
Thank you. I'm Claire Daly. I'm one of the project workers for Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloss Shaping Places. We've also got a focus on food security, and we've got a geographical approach. So we're focusing on particular areas of high need, 3 in Bristol and 1 each in North Somerset and South Gloucestershire. Laura's the other project worker, and I are both based at Bristol City Council, and I'm working on the areas in Bristol, which has made that slightly easier for me to negotiate all the processes that are needed, especially for our first stage, which we've been trying to get lead organisations on board in each of those areas, because the project is co-produced. So to do that, obviously, we can't do that as a council. We need to get organisations that are doing that work on the ground on board. And yeah, that's my issue that I would like to talk about. We have made progress since the last meeting, so that's good. We've got all the area leads in place in Bristol. So in one of the areas, we have 1 lead organisation, and that was supported by other groups in the area who none of the rest of them had capacity to take on the role, even with our funding. So only one of them was able to do that, but the others are all supporting. And another area, we had a joint application between 2 organisations, one of which was a community garden and one which is a cooking education charity. So that worked really well. And we were, I think when I spoke last time, I was talking about us trying to encourage collaborative applications rather than competitive, and that really worked. So we only had one application in the first area. We had that a joint application of 2 organisations in the second area, and in the third area we did have 2 competitive expressions of interest, but they were very different. So one from like a community anchor organisation, a community hub, and one from 2 BAME organisations working together. That area is nearer the inner city of Bristol and is much more culturally diverse. So what we did is say, we would like to fund you both, would you collaborate? So I'm sure you've all experienced this, that collaboration takes a lot longer. So, you know, we had meetings, they both agreed to collaborate, so that was really good. We had a meeting about how that might work, because obviously the funding would be split, but in terms of who's going to do what in the project, that would also need to be split. And just today I had the first meeting of that project team. Everyone seems to be happy, and we're talking about, we started doing a bit of community engagement, and it just feels like we're actually getting somewhere in Bristol. In North Somerset and South Gloucestershire, it has been more challenging because we're not based in those councils. So Laura has had to form lots of relationships very quickly, find out how processes work, and to be quite frank, bang heads together to get things happening, and sort of really give people deadlines like, we need to get this out now, otherwise, you know, schools won't be able to apply because it will be the summer holidays. And they just had a meeting yesterday in North Somerset where they agreed that there was only one application, but it was a joint application with about 10 organisations involved. So that was agreed, and that was great because they didn't need us to facilitate that. They came to us with that partnership in place. And then South Gloucestershire, they've decided on a model of asking for 4 organisations to share the lead role. And that's probably the most challenging area because there isn't those relationships already. There was quite a lot of bad feeling that a certain large organisation tended to get all the contracts and other smaller groups were left out. So hoping by using this model of 4 organisations working together that should help. But that hasn't closed yet, so they're just waiting to see what kind, if they do get 4 interested organisations, and then how to facilitate those relationships. So I suppose that sort of summary gets me to my question, which is how much do we get involved to try and facilitate people working together and doing the work, and how much do we let them run with it? And also in terms of now they've started the work in the areas in Bristol, there's been a range of different interpretations of the same brief, and how much do we intervene and how much do we say, yeah, go with your interpretation? Yeah, I'm going to stop talking now.
So let me just open the floor up to comments and questions, I think. Anyone want to kick off? Emma?
So I kind of off the top of my head, as a person from the voluntary sector, I kind of am often in that position of being, you know, in a very similar position that you're talking about, Claire. And I guess the kind of whole relationship thing, I think one of the challenges that's not going to necessarily help in with your situation is that when those relationships have been built up over time, and they're not just kind of in relation to a particular funding bid or call, it is really helpful. So sometimes when they're having to be made quickly in and around a particular call for funding, it is much more challenging because there are, you know, but some of the kind of principles of supporting that ongoing collaborative relationship between voluntary sector organisations is really useful, because I think it can then support more ongoing collaboration. And then I guess the question back I would have around how much autonomy you know, people have to go off and do to perceive it in the way that they're perceiving it is, I guess it's how much do you, I suppose if it fits in with the overall brief and it's broadly in line, then it feels to me that autonomy is really important, so that the different organisations can bring you the particular skills that you're wanting from the different perspectives that they have. But there is, I guess, something around how you know, how much that is, you know, what is going too far, and when did it become not actually linked into what your core purpose are. And then I guess then that's a conversation that I would want to be having with the partner to think about what, you know, what is and what isn't appropriate.
And I guess I'd ask again about the granularity of the action that you've taken so far, and the differences between South Somerset and Gloucester and Bristol, and in particular, I mean, when you've been soliciting your bids, how much has that just been sort of a, you know, so engagement can be, you know, sending out a text or a few emails versus sitting down and quite detailed face-to-face conversations about what's, you know, is there a shared view about what you might want to see actually happening in North, or what the, or even better, what people whose food supplies are less than secure, what would they want to see happening in their patches? Are they the same in Bristol versus North Somerset? How do you find that out? How do you end up with a shared understanding between you and the other organisations and the public about what it is you would like to see changed or done? And so what it, I mean, I don't know whether those are whether you've had those sorts of conversations, how you might have those conversations. So yes, it's what would you like to do? What have you done? What?
Yes, yeah, no, we very much did. You know, the first sort of 2 or 3 months of our post, because we only started in November last year, was spent sort of doing that engagement one-to-one with key organisations in all of the areas, talking to them about what's already happening, how the project could fit in, if they would be interested in some funding for this work. And that's why it's already looking different in each of the areas, because you know, because of the conversations in South Gloucestershire, that actually relationships have been really difficult between the voluntary and community sector and with the council. That's why different models have come up, and different partnerships.
Give us a feel for the sort of practical things on, if all this was to work, what would happen? What sort of things would you be seeing happening for citizens in the different places?
Well, the idea, we still sort of haven't actually got to that yet. So the idea is now we have people on board that are in the position to do the community engagement, which has started, and ask people what they think is needed to improve food security. Then we have £20,000 for each of those areas to develop the initiatives. So again, that will look very different and really depend on what's already happening, what residents would like to see, and what's feasible in our short time scale.
So the 20,000 is for the initiative. What about the engagement, which is a process that presumably consumes some resource?
Yeah, that's been that's what the lead organisations are doing first with the funding that we've provided them with.
Okay. And just one other, because the other bit I know about Bristol, I used to work in Bristol many moons ago, and there was something called the Hartcliffe Health and Environment Action Group, which I think is now the heart of BS13, and which is a community development project that got going about 30 years ago. And I remember that they started with food and food security on the estate was one of the things. Is they started off with a cooking club in which people had to produce recipes that could be, which could be produced for less than £1 and bought within a 5-minute walk of the estate, and they ended up with celebrity chefs and goodness knows what else. But I don't know whether there's any experiences from that group that would help any of this, given some of they've got quite a long experience in that. It's just a genuine question.
Yeah. No, Hartcliffe aren't one of our areas, but we're working in a next door area. But they have at Hartcliffe and Withywood have actually got
Correct.
the highest food insecurity in Bristol.
Yeah.
Now, probably not when the areas were decided sort of 3 years ago, but yes, I know that I've had some contact with them, and they're doing they're just piloting a new healthy weight project with a focus on food. So yeah, we very much want to learn from that and link with them and the work they're doing too.
And any thoughts from others? I mean, it sounds like the engagement piece is still really important at the moment. Is that right?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of engagement with stakeholders, and now we're starting to sort of go out and engage with people with lived experience and residents, and make sure that we cover the diversity of groups in each of the areas. I can see there's some comments in the chat, but I can't
I'm
read
sorry, I
them
missed
at
the
all
chat.
at the
You're right.
same time. Sorry.
Let me have a look. Paul. So, Paul, how much could you intervene ensuring collaboration? I think the answer depends on whether you want, as a core purpose, to create more collaborative relationships with the voluntary sector. If that's part of your core purpose, then I think you need to help them engage with each other in a collaborative way. If that's the case, you've got a great laboratory of such different locations to learn how collaboration actually works. You could help them learn from each other's problems and solutions on how to collaborate. So there's two questions there. One is about, is building collaborative relationships with the voluntary sector a core purpose alongside the food security? And secondly, you've got the laboratory as a process for how to the variation and how to do it. And Karen's also hands up.
Yeah, it's not the core purpose of the project, but I think it will really aid the project. So that's the approach we're taking, that if we can build their collaborative relationships that can last beyond the project, particularly with regard to coordinating food responses, then that will be really beneficial. So yes, I think the answer is to that we're hoping that we can do some of that as part of the project, and particularly in South Gloss, because we're sort of neutral in a way, because we're kind of, we're employed by the Bristol City Council. It's easier for us to negotiate those relationships between organisations and the council there. And in what the inner city area of Bristol I mentioned, where we brought competitive bids together into a collaboration, we're hoping that will last as well beyond the project and lead to the community hub working much more closely with those BAME organisations, which are really crucial because it has such a high population from those communities.
Interesting. Karen.
It's just a question really. When you talked about engaging with residents, I just wondered what that looked like, and how you, when you talk about the engagement and you engage with them and they're giving you the information, what do you do with it as well? What is that to inform, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so good question. Thank you, Karen. The engagement is to inform what we spend that money on. So we're asking people what stops them from eating well, what would they like to see to help them eat better, what do they access at the moment in terms of food projects and provision, or what else would they like to see. We're very much at the start of that, so anything you can share from what you've done in Stainsforth would be really helpful. We've got a few questions together, so we've looked at what other people are asking in Bristol and other areas of the quality of life survey, the food equality strategy, what questions they had asked, and then sort of building on that, using the UN. We've looked at the UN food security scale as well, sort of pulling a couple of things out of that. But what's really nice as well is areas are not all working at the same pace. So are they being able to say, oh, well, you know, Lawrence Western have come up with these questions. So if you want to have a look at what they've come up with and see what you think, and rather than start with a blank sheet of paper, that's been really nice, actually, sharing between different areas, and they've asked for more of that to happen.
Can we just unpick a little, focus on this a little bit, just about the process of engagement again, and other people's experience? So how are you setting about it? How are you finding the people? Are you giving, is it paper? Is it face to face? Is it in groups? Is it one to one? Is it in schools? Is it in food bank? How are you doing it? And I'd really value other people's thoughts about the practicalities of how to get that engagement as productive as possible. And then before you answer that, Emily's got her hand up, and then Karen again. Emily.
Well, I was just going to say, I think Claire, because you're working across so many geographies, and so are we in Southwest Shropshire, and I think it makes it extra difficult to really focus on engagement in every single area. For us, each town is so different, and all the stakeholders are so different, and so I think it's much easier for a project like this, perhaps looking back in time, if we could have gone for one geography, because then you can focus all your efforts on building up those stakeholders and really engaging out into the community. And I'm really aware that, like Northumberland, Doncaster, you've been able to really get out into the communities and really understand them. And I know Kate, it's working with us in Shropshire, has been out in South West Shropshire, but I think it's just so much harder. And so for us, we have to go through kind of key partners, and there's like extra layers to it, which so I really appreciate what you're saying.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I think to answer your question, Nick, all of the above. So the conversations we've had with our partners on the ground is, if we can agree on questions, and we're just going to go out in all our settings. So, for example, it's obviously coming up to the summer holidays, so people that are running half activities are going to take those questions out and like just see what's most appropriate in the setting. So it might be a conversation, it might be post-its on the wall, it might actually be people prefer it to be on a device, but yeah. And that's the beauty of the partnership working, is that everyone's taking it and using it differently.
And have you got a feel, or you may not be far enough through it, to which of those methods have been most productive for you?
We're just right at the start, so we've just had the first few events, really.
So Karen.
I forgot what I was going to say now, to be honest. It was probably relating to the appreciative inquiry, and Emily, we agree. I've already wrote down for us to sort of say that when we talk about why we are, the difference with us, our population in Stainforth is 6,400, so we really are on a smaller scale. And I think we have the other strength of having Kerry here who lives and works in this community, and that has been identified as a real strength, and knowing. And I know Kerry's just mentioned, Claire, I think we've already spoke to you about our appreciative inquiry.
It was the Design Council.
Oh, was it?
I think it was their team, yeah, sorry. About the appreciative inquiry and about the 4D model, what we use for Well Doncaster. Yeah, I forgot, I think it's Philippa, I think it was Philippa who contacted us and asked for that model. So yeah, that's what we would have probably advised for you to look at.
Because although we do take that approach, I mean, Shaken Stainforth, we're part of we work for public health, and Well Doncaster, we do work within the 13 most deprived communities, and have the conversations that we're having in Stainforth within those communities. So we're always out, and they are the standard questions, and we've just re-looked at them, and I think there's 4 on there.
Yeah, and it's all strength-based questions, so it's about building that community asset approach. So yeah, so it's really asking the positives, what's happening within the communities, what we're working on, and then working on them strengths.
And then what we do afterwards, we're constantly having the conversations and theming then some of the themes that come out. But then I think one of the most important things is we have positive action groups where they are held about every 4 weeks, and that's where all those conversations are brought to one place, and we're asking residents and partners to look at the actions and how they can contribute and make a difference. And we've had some real successes. So it's about involving them in the actions, not just asking them the questions. We're involving them in the solutions as well. And across Doncaster, we've had some real strengths and successes. So and part of our team as well, we've got a wealth side to the team, which it supports us in shaping Stainforth, and that's where we are engaging with those real strong volunteers and developing the community, the voluntary organisations. And our lead is constantly looking for other funding pots, and they go into the wealth side of him. So we are investing in those community organisations, and we've just started this year doing some locality commissioning and looking at anchor organisations within localities. So we've got one in Stainforth, an organisation who actually it's in the next village, but they are kind of the purse string holders for, I think there was £110,000, and then we're encouraging the smaller voluntary organisations to apply for that, and they screen them. So it's a bit of a hyperlocal commissioning way, so we've got all that in place now. So we're lucky that we're within a wider team that are already doing and supporting what we're trying to do as well. But we're happy to share anything. If anybody wants anything, we're happy to share any, we've got for the locality commissioning, we've got all the agreements and everything that we can share, and all the guidance, what we've developed a guidance on it. So if anybody wants that, more than happy to share that.
Thanks, Karen. And yeah, as I said, we were sort of at the question stage at the moment. So Kerry, if you could share the questions with us. I think Philippa did put them up on a Miro board, but I think it'd be useful to have the actual document. And yeah, any sort of guidance about processes with councils. I mean, that is working with 3 councils. It is proving quite challenging.
I mean, we have a challenge. One of our challenges very much internal. So we are really strength based and looking at the positives within our communities and getting residents to support us. But within Doncaster Council, we have a communities team who are really focused on that law enforcement side and everything like that. So our challenge is getting them to look at the strengths in the community rather than the negatives. So we have slightly different obstacles to climb over, but they're pretty local really to us, and they are about relationships in the council, and there's something that we do see that we can overcome, but they're taking time to tough nuts to crack.
Fantastic. So again, I think we're running out of time for this, but again, I think a big theme here has been the importance of high quality engagement, and I think we've had a number of things that have come out which also chime with what I've heard from other places as well, about a dialogue being a meaningful about finding the space for a real conversation in which you're asking about about looking for the strengths in communities rather than just the holes, about turning the engagement into a relationship, the regularity of meetings, and actually I think good engagement can then lead naturally onto good co-design. If you're fortunate enough to have somebody on part of your team who has that obvious link to the community, I think that often makes a difference as well, because you're building trust and the importance of being careful that the promises, the expectations that you raise, you can then deliver on afterwards. it being hard work. I think that's the other thing. And the number of places you've got the capacity to hold that dialogue with, it does take time and effort. But I think that's the message. But it is, the engagement is real work, and it creates the foundation, the trust from which you can move forward. And I think that's, I mean, the learning that you and is coming from others, I think is really important. So fantastic. I think we're out of time. Just looking at Louise, is that right? We're about there for the next one.
I think ideally, if we could wrap it up, that'd be great. Thanks, Nick.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's move. Claire, anything else you wanted to say or add? And I hope that's been of some help for you.
Yes.
Where should we go next? Emily, should we do Shropshire?
Yeah, we're happy to
Fantastic.
talk about Shropshire. I've got.
Let's get so the floor is yours, Emily. So remind us what you're up to, what you've been doing, what's gone well, what hasn't had the impact you wanted, and so forth.
No, it's great. And I've got Kate here as well from Citizens Advice Shropshire. So we're going to do a bit of a tag team, although we haven't prepared who's going to say what. So we'll see what happens. I was just thinking on a reflection on the previous conversation. One of the things I think we mentioned in our last session was about our food bank survey and how we've been going into the food bank to collect data, talking to people in the food bank. And we've really been using that as a opportunity to open up conversations with other people in the community. So once we've got that really local research, it's kind of easier to go and talk to other people about it as a starting point. So I just wanted to mention that. So what we wanted to talk about was our trial of Citizens Advice First Aider training, which we have started in South West Shropshire. I thought I might show some slides with you just to change the tone of the session, mostly because I want to show you a really pretty picture. So hopefully
we can see that. We can see your 10-year vision shaping places.
Great. That's great. So it was just really because I just wanted to locate why we're doing this piece of training with our vision. So we're thinking it through. So our 10-year vision is around communities and organisations working together. We want everyone in Shropshire to have access to the help and support they need to prevent food insecurity. We want that people will experience good health, well-being, and inequalities will be reduced. And we really want to focus on people having sufficient income, access to enough healthy, affordable food, and the knowledge and skills needed to prepare it. And we keep coming back to our vision because I think it's just important to keep us grounded in it. So one of the challenges that we find with people who are getting support from food banks is that they are not being linked into the wider advice system. And our system in Shropshire is very stretched, increasingly stretched as finances become more difficult. So we wanted to pilot this Advice First Aider training. And I wonder, Kate, if you want to take us through this slide.
Yeah, not a problem. So yeah, it was something that was being run by other Citizens Advice branches. But it was new to Shropshire. So we had, first of all, we did a lot of research. We spoke to some of the other branches who sort of shared some words of wisdom and some slides. So, but what we really wanted to do was make it very specific to towns in the area. So as we went through different tasks, excuse me, we actually had sort of case studies which related specifically to the town that we delivered it in. So like Emily said, what we were hearing during the discovery phase was a lot of people having difficulty to navigate the system, and that wasn't just the clients, it was also the organisations. So because Citizens Advice is impartial and it's trustworthy, it's got a good sort of reputation as well, we thought that could be sort of the sort of focal point when we're delivering the training is sort of to look at where Citizens Advice could potentially assist in people in their problems. So we sort of came up with these were sort of our aims for the session really, which we are carrying on forward as we're developing it further. So it was really, we want people to go away from the session feeling that they're more confident where they can signpost people to, and you know, again, coming through the food bank survey, we were hearing about how being given the food is just one element. There's lots of other issues around the person that's at that food bank, and the people that were dealing with them didn't always know how to sort of help them further. So it was also to sort of improve the information offered by Citizens Advice and how they could help. And also because obviously Citizens Advice themselves are sort of under the pressure as well with the cost of living. So a lot more people are phoning in. There is a real shift towards self-help where possible. And we know that not everybody has that capability. So we sort of wanted to offer this training to frontline staff and volunteers who might have that sort of capacity to sort of work with somebody on that self-help basis, to sort of triage really the issues, to also support people who might be digitally, physically or financially excluded, and we wanted to reach the most vulnerable people in the community. It was really about we didn't want to burden the organisations with more work, so what we wanted this to do to sort of fit in with what they were already doing. So we sort of framed it as it's an upskill for frontline staff and volunteers, community organisations, to increase their confidence and knowledge and to support their clients further. And we also really wanted to strengthen the networks between the voluntary community organisations. As you can see from our vision, is that's a real key part in moving forward. So the pilot itself we ran in Ludlow, which is one of our towns in our area, with 2 organisations who work in the same town but very rarely sort of cross over. So one was a community group and the other one was the food bank. So we had 10 places and we assigned 5 places for each organisation. Also with the intention of sort of trying to build that networking opportunity as well. I don't know if you want to pick up, Emily, or if you want me to.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that alongside the first aider training, we've also part funded a Citizens Advice advisor to be based in the food banks in South West Shropshire. So it's part of a larger model. So we're training volunteers and staff so they can identify whether to signpost somebody to information and have a simple conversation, or if that person needs more complex support, they can now refer straight into that advisor. So we wanted to focus the session on these 3 words really: ask, assist, act, which just takes people through those options. I'm sure you could explain it more clearly, Kate.
Yeah, and I think that this kind of become more of a message when talking to other organisations in the community. It's kind of about every interaction that you have with somebody is to make that interaction count. So it's about asking the right questions. So we had an exercise on listening where one person spoke, the other person listened and couldn't intervene or ask questions. And then we were looking at sort of the website to sort of identify where there's certain areas that Citizens Advice can and can't help with. And then again, it was all sort of centered around, do I signpost this person or do I refer this person? And I think, like Emily said, the fact that we've now got an advisor in the area has been such a huge development. And also then to give the power to those organisations to be able to actually refer in, so they get given a code, it goes through the Citizens Advice system. So it's like another layer to that kind of support that they can offer. And also I think a lot of people when they signpost, they don't necessarily know what the outcome's going to be, or you kind of release that client into the wilderness and they don't actually know whether they've actually been picked up. Whereas with this referral system, that they've had an appointment made, they can meet them at a certain location that's convenient for them, and then they're them being dealt with as well. So yeah, it's this kind of like, we're just sort of saying, have the conversation, listen to what they're telling you, think about what Citizens Advice could help with. Are they able to help themselves? Are they able to look at the information themselves, or do they need that referral? So it's that kind of 3 broken down sort of steps really.
So we ran a pilot session in Ludlow in May, and we booked to run a second pilot session in Church Stretton in August, and we've reflected a lot on the first session. We learned an enormous amount from it, so we are refining the sessions as we go.
Yeah, I think as well, because we sort of had we did a survey with the group before and after, just to sort of monitor things that we thought would be useful to know. So have you learnt more about citizens' advice? Are you now more confident? And I think from our learnings, we also found out a lot of things just from being there. So for us, I think Emily would agree, was one of the key things we picked up on was actually how that some of the volunteers weren't very digitally confident, or were actually digitally excluded. So in our original plan, you know, we've got this interactive session about what makes
just one moment. I think someone's could go on mute. Lovely, thank you. Back to you, Kate.
Somebody else in my room. Then I was like, oh, that's a bit creepy. Yeah. So I think it was we'd sort of planned, you know, to have like this Slido interactive session where they could vote about what made a good listener. And actually, within a very short space of time, we realised that's not going to happen. So we did go for the old flip chart and post-it notes. And I think sort of going back to Claire's comment about that engagement it's really about sort of tailoring it to whatever group you're with. So I don't think there's any one way to target that kind of collecting the information to engage people. So it could be a survey, it could be digital, it could be lots and lots of different things. It could be that interactive, jotting things on a post-it note and sticking it on a wall. And you know, and I think it's not about excluding other sort of methods. It's about sort of using all of them. And I think we probably went in, we thought we'd planned as best as we could, but I think we've certainly learned about finding out a little bit more about the volunteers that are coming to the session. I mean, we also heard from some of them that, I mean, one of the questions was, have you ever been on the Citizens Advice website? And there were people in there that had never been on any website. So straight away we thought, okay, this is a different level. Some of them weren't really in a particular role where they'd be able to refer. So maybe they don't have access to a laptop whilst they're in the food bank, or, you know, so straight away we were thinking, right, next time we need to be really explicit in these are the requirements of the training. So we do need a sort of a basic level of digital skills, even without, you know, using a Slido and using post-it notes. Ultimately, you will be navigating a website with these clients, so you need to feel confident to do that. I'm just looking at Annex. We wrote so many things down, like not just from, you know, what they told us, that their knowledge of Citizens Advice was 100% after the session, but it was a lot of these things that kind of came about without our knowing, really, and how sort of other conversations started and triggered us to think, oh, maybe we changed that. So one of the other things we're going to do as well, we were talking very much about listening and having those conversations, but what we're going to do now is really focus on stigma, because we did pick up on some of the conversations and the opinions being shared were a little bit like, oh, well, you know, you can't really say that to a client, or, you know, that's not how we'd approach it. So actually having that kind of open forum and these activities to let them sort of discuss amongst themselves, we could really sort of listen to any kind of personal bias and, you know, where messages might not be quite accurate. So I think for the next session, we're really going to focus on that element of stigma and how to have appropriate conversations, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think we thought that we had simplified everything down as far as we possibly could. But what we learned from that session is that we have to refine and refine and refine again. And we just need to keep our information as clear as we possibly can. And we also need to be really aware that our kind of like volunteer force across that area, people have hugely different abilities, and those are the people who are supporting people in crisis. So we have to support those people so that they can hold the best conversations that they possibly can. So we're looking forward to the second pilot, and I think what's really nice now in terms of community engagement is that we have, you know, we've got the surveys, we've got that local data, we've got our basket researcher, which again is like hyper local. This is what's happening in your community. now we've got this offer of the training, and we're going to have the community meetings. So I think it's important that the community feels that we're offering them things as well as asking them questions. So it's a reciprocal arrangement. So that's really important to us.
Yeah, I think for us, one of the things we sometimes find difficult is where, I mean, it's been so useful, particularly with the coaching that we've been having from Design Council as well, is just to sort of simplify, hone in, and focus on that sort of element of hope for us has been really key, because we've got so much data and it's sort of like we're aware maybe sometimes it's so easy to overwhelm people with information. So I think, you know, some of our diagrams now in hindsight are quite complicated, and I think, you know, when you're trying to present them and you think this is complicated to explain, then maybe we need to go back to the drawing board. And, you know, so that's been part of this training as well, is just to look at each slide almost and say, is this as simple and as effective as it could be? And all the tasks that we're asking people to do, is this, you know, as important as, say, another task? Because we are confined. The pilot was 3 hours long, so it was quite a long session with a 15-minute break. And before the next rollout, I've actually been engaging with the two organisations we've invited to sort of get their input as well, to sort of say, well, what is it that you'd like from this session? And they did sort of say, actually, because we are going to have some staff on there, 3 hours is quite a long time to lose staff out of the day. So, you know, we're looking at maybe doing a 2 to 2.5 hour session and different levels. So one could just be about signposting and one could be about referring. So we learned from the first one, and then we sort of then go into the next organisations and saying, this is what we've done. Would this work for you? What could we add to it? What could we tweak from it as well? So I feel like actually the organisations have been more involved in influencing, you know, the content of this next session.
It sounds like it's been a really successful piece of engagement, and there was lots in that. It was about 10 people or so. The dialogue with people before and afterwards. You clearly created a safe space for conversation. You were adaptable. You responded. Presumably the physical space was conducive to. I don't know whether you had tea and coffee there or all the rest of it, but it's all those little details, I'm sure, that add up to something that makes it that works.
We even had homemade biscuits brought by one of the participants. It was very, very beautiful.
but it's those little details that make such a difference, isn't it? And if there's no tea or coffee, and it's all, or if it's all sort of completely undrinkable, or it's a place they don't want. Where did you hold these places? Was it an institutional place? Physically, where did you do it?
So we did the first pilot in, it's like a community church, which is where the food bank operates from. And the second pilot, we're going to do it from a community centre. So it's really important that they're places that people feel comfortable.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we often skip past those details. We talk about the questionnaire that we used, or the flip charts, or the post-it notes, or whatever it was. But I think what you're illustrating is the importance of those very practical bits. The identifying the groups you allocated, and that you talk to people. You, as I say, the environment is where they're comfortable, not places necessarily where they're overly professionalized or associated with lots of people in uniforms or whatever it is. And I think those details are really, really important. Okay. Other people's thoughts and comments.
I just had a thought linked to that. Is one of our partners on the steering group, he's an academic, and he's interested in arts and well-being and health, but understanding the mechanisms of how it works. So some of the work he's been doing as part of this project is to engage with groups in Blythe who improve well-being, but to ask exactly those questions, like, how do you set up the room? How do you welcome people? How do you what you know, rather than just saying, oh, we improve well-being, but like, how do you, what is it you do that actually improves it, and trying to document that with a view to potentially getting a bigger research bid in the future. So it's really slow because you're going at the pace of organisations who don't have much capacity to spend time thinking about this, but also he's paired them up with residents who want to document that activity as well. But they're the things that never get written down about how things work and how they don't work.
Right. And my betting is also you've also created relationships between others that they will have conversations on without you that will lead to other things, is my betting.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, even down to the seating, we actually alternated them, so they weren't sitting with their own organisation. And we did hear there was a few, weren't there, Emily, that was sort of exchanging email addresses and things. So I think that was, yeah, certainly a big tick in the box for the networking.
Yeah.
And what's interesting for us is that quite a small town, 2 key organisations who are supporting vulnerable households, particularly economically vulnerable households, not one person from one organisation knew one person from the other organisation, and there's only like half a mile between them. So for us, it was really important that communities working together and thinking about our sustainability. You know, it's really important for us that we are bringing organisations together, and they'll continue working together after the end of this programme. So we'll continue to try to have that cross-fertilisation.
And then a comment from Paul in the chat. So given the importance of volunteers of all of this work we're engaged in, training as a practice of increasing the capacity of those volunteers seems a really important thing. Improving the content and methods from session 1 sounds very strong, and it'll be interesting to hear from the learning from session 2. So I think that's right. Kerry.
It's Karen. I'm not sure
Karen,
whether this is relevant, Emily, to yours or whoever, but we just I don't know whether anybody's heard of the bread and butter thing. It's about supporting food poverty. So we're just starting to engage, and we're launching it. So it's not just in Stainforth though. We've got there'll be 4 hubs across Doncaster. And the interesting thing about that is it supports people out of poverty to get them onto the food ladder, you know, at a reasonable cost. And for those of you who don't know, it's anybody, there's no criteria, and it's a cost of £7.50 to get 3 bags of shopping. 80% of it's fresh, 20% store food, cupboard staples, but it also gets volunteers involved, so they're reliant on volunteers to do the bag packing and things like that. So we've got the launch coming up pretty soon. Yeah, and we'll see how it goes.
It's really exciting news, Kerry. They've done an excellent job in parts of the northwest. So
yeah,
bring it over to Yorkshire would be brilliant. I think the challenge for us, because we're rural, is organisations like that just won't be interested, because we don't have the numbers of people in one place. You need that concentration. But it's really good that it's coming over to Doncaster.
We've got the we approached all the food banks who would be a host, if you like, and there's no financial gain to the food banks. We are relying on goodwill, and we're going to have 5 hubs, but we're starting with 4, and we've got comms involved to launch it next week, and the demand will be they'll see 60 to 80 families in a sort of, well, they're down for like a 4-hour slot, and that includes all the packing and everything, so it'll be a swift operation. But next time I'll let you know how it's going next time we meet. So we're hoping, and I think the demand will be there. So even if it's 80, what will happen is, and the ownership goes on the families as well, because they're expected to, they get a text and ask if they want the food, but they have to reply and respond. And they do have to, you know, they're obviously charged, but anybody who's on, it's not anybody who's on who don't get it that week will automatically get it the next week. So it is a bit of a fairer process, because we have food pantries and things like that where people are access food pantries, and once they're on the list, they don't seem to drop off. You know what I mean? There's no fair process really in that. So this one will give an opportunity to anybody, and it's them who just, it's, they might not meet the criteria, say for free school meals and all that lot. It's them who are just earning that little bit and are really struggling. So
Well, thank you.
I'll let you know.
So Emily and Kate, fantastic stuff. Really lots of granular detail. I don't know if this is helpful or not. Actually, there was some echoes in what you were saying, actually, with the conversation I had from a different project with some folk in East Staffordshire, where they've been working with the Mercian version of citizen advice and volunteers. And they've built a mechanism for sustaining and growing it. So they've got data with 1,600 clients that they can document some of the improvements, but also saying actually that they've saved 8,500 NHS contacts as a consequence. I can put their contact details in the chat if you wanted to talk to them. I'm sure you've got things to teach them, and that they'll have things that they can show you about their sustainability and expansion methods if you want them or not.
I'd be really interested in their methodology around how they've calculated how much they've saved the NHS.
Sure.
That would be fascinating.
I've put their email addresses in there. If you drop them a line and mention me, that I'm sure they'll be delighted to say they're enthusiasts. That's
Great,
East Staffordshire.
East Staffordshire. Great, thank you.
Fantastic. And actually, it was Liz, wasn't it? You put a comment in the chat. I think the time is up so we should probably move on to the next one. So actually, Liz, as part of your presentation, do you want to say a little bit about?
I'll need a comfort break. Is that all right?
Would people like?
I was just going to interject now, because that's all right. So we've got 2 more groups who each have 25 minutes to present. So that's 50 minutes. So we've got an hour left in total. Would people appreciate sort of a 5-minute comfort break before we embark on the final 2 presentations?
Fantastic.
Yeah, thumbs up.
Sorry, my apologies for not
absolutely fine. Don't worry.
Looking after your welfare.
Totally fine. And if we could come back for about 3:35, 36, please.
Perfect.
See you in 5 minutes.
So who have we got back?
A minute to come back from their breaks.
5 minutes goes quite quickly. Heidi.
It does indeed.
Emily. Tom's on the phone. There's Paul. Oh, some new messages.
No problem at all, Pippa. That's absolutely fine.
So Pippa, fine, thank you.
I think, thanks everyone for coming back. I think we're left with Blythe and Stainforth. We haven't
Stainforth,
yet.
exactly. Yep,
Yep. Points.
And I was going to suggest Liz kicked off, was it Blythe? And yes, so remind us about your project, what you've been up to, what's been effective and what's been less effective, any surprises, all the rest of it, and questions for the group that you may or may not want help with.
So our project, the problem we were attempting to address was people feeling sort of unsafe, poor community safety, and sort of dissatisfaction with the town centre. So there's quite a lot happening about regeneration of the town centre with capital developments as part of the levelling up agenda and all of those sort of things. There's quite a lot of regeneration coming in to Blythe, but we wanted to sort of complement that with some community development to build on what's already happening in Blythe. So to sort of address the sort of core issues, ours is about, it's really community cohesion and improving how residents relate to each other, celebrating what's good about Blythe, what's strong in Blythe. So I think we've been quite successful with the people we've been in contact around sort of changing beliefs and setting some goals and reframing the issue about what's strong, building on the assets that we've got. But that's obviously in the context of the cost of living crisis and all those global and macroeconomic issues that are going on. So that's the sort of main background. So our interventions are to have Addie, who's here today. She's a community development role in Blythe. She's also resident from Blythe. Lots of connections that she already brought to the role. So her role is just getting out there and connecting people together. The other intervention was to provide a fund for micro grants. So these are quite loosely linked back to the objectives of the project. So if they celebrate what's strong, if they encourage people to get together who wouldn't normally mix sort of that bridging, bonding capital, then community groups who've got ideas can come forward and apply for a micro grant. But that's distributed by a panel of residents from Blythe that Tom, who's also on the call, who's from Blythe Valley CVA, helped support us with around developing training. He also provides sort of a chairing role for that panel. We regularly talk to that panel about how things are going and adapting the micro grant program. We've tweaked it from how it originally was set up based on their feedback. So that's funded all sorts of different activities, and we capture the activity, we capture it from feedback about what's worked well, who's it worked for, any surprising things that happened. So we try, and we've also captured feedback on how that whole process works to see if people want to change, if we need to change it at all. Yeah, so Addie's just sort of out there all the time, just trying to connect people together, support new groups to develop, along with the support of Tom's team, who provides that sort of infrastructure support to the VCS. So that their team have been a really big help and supported Addie in her role as well. I think the sort of thing we're working on now is thinking about sustainability of the project. So not just the funding side of it, but actually the role and what we can influence and embed in the future. So the residents panel, you know, what, you know, we don't want to say, all right, money's all gone now, just go back home, but like, what can that role develop into? So that will involve engaging with other parts of the council as well, and the town council. And then Addie's worked with quite a large group that started with a very sort of a problem solving focus, and Addie's, the work she's done to really change that around about like what's strong here, what assets have we got. So we commissioned training for that group. So they're people from all sorts of different organisations working in Blythe, through the police, housing, about asset-based community development. So they've gone through sort of 7 modules of that, and that's just coming to an end. So yeah, we're just going to start gathering feedback from them about how they think that might have changed their views and beliefs. And I think the tricky thing that Addie's, she probably should come in, and because she's much closer to it, is just how you organise so many people who want to work together to improve an area, and into a way that it all works and people communicate with each other and things. People know what's happening. We're often, you know, go into that, well, let's set up a committee meeting type of arrangement with chairs and vice chairs and minutes and notes, but that takes a lot of feeding, you know, capacity to do that. So it's other ways of doing that. I think that's what Addie's been sort of struggling with. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Addie.
No, that's true, because that partnership in particular, it ended up initially was set up to look at a micro, like just a small ward in Blythe, and then quickly the issues that evolved from that, you know, like the social behavior, retail crime, housing, and substance misuse turned out to be a Blythe-wide, initiative, and we grew that much that now we had to restructure the whole thing. So now we're having teething problems with the restructuring because some members don't agree with this, and it's difficult to find the key players to kind of continue with the subgroups and keep them alive, and then feed into where we are in terms of the strategic level.
Because that's an important part, isn't it, of systems thinking, is all those different perspectives and all the different contributions they've got, and sort of trying to get a shared approach that you can all sort of sign up to. But then when it gets big and you try and sort of chunk it up in a different way, then you break up some of that a little bit. So yeah, that's our problem for today.
And it's managing all of those, expectations, but also being fair to everybody and making sure that the ones that have lower voices are getting heard, because it can be quite intimidating at times when you go to a meeting and you're running out of the town chamber, like in terms of physical space, to have a proper say. So then people relay back to the likes of myself or the chair to kind of put forward issues or concerns. We're even looking at changing the chair, because in the initial chair, some people were saying it's too, the reputation of that person is too overpowering, and people didn't feel like they could talk to that person as much, even though that person is lovely and will take time to talk to you and will, go out of their way to do things. So at the moment we are just working with a very small cluster on the strategic side to kind of see how things get into shape or sift through to kind of help out.
Fantastic. And Tom, you're part of the team. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I mean, I just think it's, it was getting that balance, I suppose, between some things that were already happening and what the Shaping Places program could contribute to and could be part of. So I think Liz mentioned, there's quite a lot of regeneration going in the town centre at the minute, but if people didn't feel confident or safe about going out into the community or into other venues or into the town centre, then there's not much point in doing those, those redevelopments there. They'd just become white elephants like that. So, the fact that people have got more activities that they can take part in, more activities that they're meeting other people with, and they're feeling, that they've got stronger relationships and friendships there, means that they'll be able to take advantage of some of the other interventions that are happening around us. And as I say, sort of, we can support some of that from some of those VCS groups, whether it's the local community centres, whether it's local, specific projects to either the geography or of the area, or thematic to what people are interested in, whether it's an older person's activity, whether it's a younger person's activity, whether it's a women's event, whether it's a, a health event, then we can really sort of try and link those together so that people get the knowledge of all of the service and the support available, because there is a lot of services and support available in all of our communities. Just people don't know how to find out about it, or they only find out about it too late. So it's trying to make sure people can take advantage of those in a timely fashion.
And we're actively, talking to Blyth Town Council, for example, and key stakeholders in Blyth around how can we make sure that residents get the right information at the right time. What would be that method? Because Facebook is the easiest way, isn't it? Is the thing today, but not all of our residents have access to internet or use social media whatsoever. Even though they have internet, they might use Twitter or Instagram or TikTok instead of Facebook. So it's finding that right platform. I don't have a solution yet. It's just ongoing conversations that we are having for a few months now in Blyth of what would be the best option or options.
I think, sorry, I was just going to say.
You go, Tom.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking as well, so, because, ADE's role has been put within public health within the local authority, and, I've said this before, so there's no surprise to them, but, I wasn't always sure about that being the right position for it, whether it should be a community role, whether it could be, within a different community section of the local authority or whatever sort of thing. Not really in the local authority at all. It would have been sort of my original position, but actually I think the way that we've kind of made an impact within public health is making them think, and what Liz is saying about how they will deliver their services going forward is kind of across the county is being informed by some of what we're doing in Blyth.
And another thing with us would be the microgrants. Like, we have a meeting coming up on Monday, so I have to send all the redacted applications so we can advance the panel, and I think we had 20 for this session. To which one member said, "I'm really sorry, I can't do this. I need to resign." So it's just working out the best ways. The first time we had so many, and this was without actually sending a circular email to everybody. We have over 300 contacts on our emailing list to say, don't forget the date for the last panel of this summer is this date. So I dread to think if we would have sent that email, what we would have had. But the best thing about this panel session is that some of the microgrants are really, really grassroots. So alongside Blyth CVA, we have another organization that offered to take in behalf of a group that is not constituted yet, but we're working hard to constitute them with, to take the microgrant in their behalf. So yeah.
So it was Kerry or Karen and then Emily.
It was just really about when a way that we engage with residents. So in Doncaster, they've got like a community. It's online. It's called Your Life Doncaster, and on there you can get all information and for us there's all voluntary groups on and everything, and part of that is they create newsletters as well. So I know it's digital, it's not leaflets, but it is the they're actually, so there is a newsletter which is borough-wide for Doncaster, but they are having pilots in different areas and doing bespoke ones for each community. So that's something they're trialing now, but you know, it's not, we haven't got the it's not our job to do that. It's the wider team in the council, but I didn't know whether you had something similar.
Blythe Town Council.
Yeah, there's a town council, isn't there? And Tom does sort of a newsletter for VCS groups in Blythe.
Yeah.
So we haven't really set up a separate thing. We try and keep everybody updated on the main news with the project, but I think it's more the thing that we've got is more how if you bring together a working group and everybody's really keen to be involved and it gets bigger and bigger, how do you organize yourselves to actually make it happen? You've done all your talking, you've kind of, and then how do you continue to keep that feedback going, because people like feeling they're around the table and their voice is being heard and they know what's going on, and but yeah, it's really hard to continue on that sort of structure and size. So it's other ways of organizing, so it's more organizations rather than residents.
All right.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say about the 4D model, what we use through the appreciative inquiry. And this is for Doncaster as an whole, but obviously through Shaping Safe, if we use that, and we collect the residents' voices, which is that discovery, and then we go into workshops, and that's not just with residents, that's with organisations, that's with stakeholders sat round the table, and then we go into, after we do the dream and the design, when we get to the action planning, is that we do go into something called what Karen were explaining earlier, the positive action groups. And again, we invite partners and we invite organisations and stakeholders to constantly come and sit around the table and keep updated, and that's another avenue of being updated. And that's advertised on Facebook, that's advertised in the local paper, that's advertised, again, word of mouth is always a good one, and being, like you've said already, that you are very much out there in the community, and it's just building them good relationships up and just having them conversations and saying, obviously, come along to these meetings, but that's obviously what we do within Stainforth, and it is working, it is having an impact within the community.
Fantastic. So Emily next, but did we just read the comment from Paul? It says, the fact that in Blythe there's now a very different relationship between the council and the voluntary sector is a major step forward. That good relation is worth a great deal and is a major successful outcome. When I started in community work in 1972, all voluntary sector and council relationships were truly awful. So, no, just acknowledging the success that you brought about. So, Emily, then Tom.
I just wanted to pick up on that point about communication, because I think that this is an age-old problem. I think across organisations it's really difficult, especially the more organisations you're involving. I suppose from our perspective, we try to cascade information about our project through like community connectors, through newsletters. We try to take it to as many different structures as we can, but even then we know that lots of people are not picking up that information. In terms of community, getting messages to residents at the right time, that's something we've been thinking about a lot, and we've tried a lot of different ways. We've had leaflets. This is more about the cost of living work, but leaflets. We had a joint website where we worked in partnership with our community partners to bring together information, so we're all sharing the same messages through our various channels. We've been thinking a lot this week about a Trussell Trust report that came out last week around food insecurity, and one of the major findings in that report is that so many people who come to a food bank, they've been referred to a food bank, but they haven't received any support before they get to the food bank. And one of the things that came out of that is that people are going to informal networks rather than any official information. So they're going to friends and family to have those conversations. So they're not looking on the internet. They're not, going and seeing an advisor. So we're trying to think about how we can get our messages to friends and family in the community so that everybody has a basic knowledge of the support system, so that's what we're really thinking about in Shropshire.
That's spreading the message, an important task. Tom.
Yeah, it was a bit about those kind of different mechanisms as well, I think, because as I say, so we produce a regular, fortnightly electronic newsletter that goes out to people, and we've got the Community Connectors type program through Citizens Advice, although in Northumberland it's called Thriving Together under that program, and they have a website where people can put up, VCS groups can put up their details and their services, but also if they're looking for volunteers and if people want to get involved in things, then they can go on there and look to see what's available in their communities. I think Blythetown Council at the moment, Liz and Daddy, they're putting together like a database for VCS locally, which will kind of be I don't know if it'll be quite as comprehensive with what Doncaster mentioned, but it will be a bit of a customer relationship management type system where people be able to link in with each other and connect with each other more easily than they can now. But the other one that, well, there's two things more as well. What we've been talking about is doing I've been banging on about it all the time, about doing sort of small video clips with groups and organisations, just those 40-second ones, whether it's on their phones, whether it's on using some more professional equipment, and then being able to use that for their promotion and their advertisement. And the other final bit is about, because Blythe's about a 40,000 people population, and we've got a little shopping precinct in there, and at the moment I've got a unit in there, and we publicise and promote things from the unit as well, so it's actually when people are going and getting their shopping, or when they're walking through the centre from the bus station into the marketplace, they trip across you and they pop their head in, and if there's something different or a brightly coloured leaflet, they might come across and have a look at it, and that might spark off a conversation. So that's kind of been a helpful thing as well. And one of the things I'm talking about with that as well is maybe having like an interactive display board that people will promote things even when we're not there, so that people can see things and find out about things. It might not have all the audio on all the time because in the shopping centre they've got other things happening, but at least it would be able to show people what's happening and how they can get in touch with things.
I mean, the other issue I've taken is, so again, a lot about engagement and dialogue and relationships, but the other thing I think I've taken from a lot of this is a lot of this work actually is designed to strengthen resilience and agency. In a way, a micro grant, building on the strengths, giving people voice, building a story about place, feels to me that maybe putting words into your mouth with that, but it feels as it's not so much about creating the service, it's about giving people a sense of yes, their own autonomy and agency and confidence to in their community.
Yeah, because a big part of the ABCD training that we've had is kind of finding out from residents what would get them to show up. So it has to, so you don't go with like, I want to talk to you about this or that. You literally say, what would you, if you knew a few other, so we've got some postcards that we've designed. So if you knew a few other people were willing to get involved to help you, what would you like to do in your area? So it's a completely sort of empty, and it is to try and like activate and connect people together with similar interests.
And again, it feels to me like a theme is for lots of these projects that have started with a particular focus. You go in, you build a relationship, but then you can broaden out into other aspects in the community, building stronger relationships, creating new platforms for people to do new things. So almost the network a bit, it just builds stronger, but it is still hard work to keep it going, to holding people together, creating common story, creating, I mean, that sense of real work here really comes across, I think. Louise, we were running out of time, I think. Is that right?
I think unless there's anything that the Blythe team really want to get in, we've got about 30 minutes left, including a tiny little debrief at the end.
Sure. Anything else? Any questions you've got, or anything else, other comments you wanted to add? It's again, and again, I think as Paul's comments, it there feels like in common with the other project, that there is a real sense of progress. You really are strengthening these relationships, which really are helping to strengthen a community, strengthen a place. And again, in different places we had, in previous actions, learning sets, we've talked about the different sorts of community, the place-based ones, particularly where there's been a single industry, versus the more community of interest type communities. But they are different forms of community, but some of the same lessons seem to apply across. I think we should move on to our last but not least, which is Stainsforth.
Hello.
And Karen.
We like the way you say that. It makes us sound really posh, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. That's my sort of southern upbringing.
No, it's all right. So just a bit of background. There's myself, I lead on the programme, then we've got Kerry. We've also got, who aren't present at the moment, we've got 2 apprentices. One is a youth worker, young people, and the other one's health and well-being, with a focus on young people as well. And so our ultimate aim is improving mental health and well-being within the community. So that's what we're trying to achieve, but it's looking at those wider determinants of health that impacts that and what we can do to support it. I think, if we're honest, probably Kerry sat here and will probably agree, one of our challenges has been, we've had so many ideas and what we can do, we really have to pool his thoughts into what we can achieve and everything, and that's a lesson that we've learned. And I know you all know we spent an awful lot of time last year building up relationships and getting the residents on board. We spent a significant amount of our money last year investing in those relationships, and we can honestly say that we're only where we are now because it's paid off, and it was well worth building them foundations. If we have, and we're looking now within Doncaster, we're looking at, they are looking at other areas of doing some regenerative work. So they are looking at lessons learned, what we've done. So we are, and I'm contributing to support what actions they do as well. Some of what we've been really focusing on is, obviously we've got the children and young people, but we have got some really good examples where we are seeing systems change as well. And it was through, I'll just give you an example, through one of the PAGs, the Positive Action Groups, that we've done. We're actually sat in a building within Stainforth at the moment, and it's the Aspire building, who are a commissioned service for drug and alcohol substance misuse support, and they're wanting to use it as a community space. So we use it on a Thursday. But with Kerry had organised this group, and there must have been 25 people, 25 residents around. So do you want to?
Yeah. So where it came from is, obviously when we did the discovery right at the beginning, and we got the systems mapping, one of the wider effects of mental health was residents were really saying about drugs and alcohol and crime related were having a real effect on people's mental health living in Stainforth. And again, I can sort of obviously sympathise with residents because I live in Stainforth. I see it. I see them true inequalities, what affects the mental health, which is obviously drug related and alcohol related. So when we've obviously looked at the systems mapping and we've done a focus on that, and we're constantly revisiting through the appreciative inquiries, we're constantly revisiting the insights and the conversations of the residents. We're asking residents these strength-based questions, but obviously different issues, different themes do come out. And one of the ones what was still coming out was drugs and alcohol. So Aspire is actually commissioned through Public Health. So we got in touch with the team who commissioned Aspire to be in Stainforth, because one of the conversations, well, not one of the conversations, quite a few conversations we were having with residents was, we've got a community hub building in Stainforth. It's never open. There's people what would love to go to and seek advice, seek support from this drug and alcohol service, but it's never open. And this was the conception really, like from residents. So again, we brought these insights back to the Public Health Commission, and then they got us in touch with Aspire. We got a really good relationship with the director now of Aspire, where we really voice these insights back and these conversations back to what we were having with residents. And he's really took them on board, and now he's wanting to open, like Cameron was saying, this community asset up as a community building. They're wanting to deliver more services as well from the building to open that up. So we've obviously all this good work what's happening within Stainforth with the Aspire service. We asked them to come along to a positive action group, which Karen was saying we had quite a few residents sat around the table. We had a few partners, stakeholders there as well, and the Aspire was just basically telling the residents of what their service does, what they would expect to have come into a service, or even signposting another obviously resident over to that service. And when we was sat, and I've been singing this from the rooftops for quite some time, obviously even with Karen, and saying how bad of a problem drug and alcohol is within Stainforth community, and what we're facing as inequalities, and that real grassroots, like the postcode, how I explain it, the street inequalities, what no insight or no data could actually show anybody who's sat analysing data and looking at all them figures and them findings. It's really being on the streets, knowing that, like I say, them true inequalities. And I've spoke to Karen before about it. I've spoke to the substance misuse team about it, and I think it really hit home when Karen heard
some of the stories from the residents. It blew me away that people live like that. And I did know, Kerry had shared it numerous times, and I think it was really important that she were a manager at that one from Aspire, weren't it? Yeah. She couldn't believe what she were hearing. So they're gonna come back and do some work. She's taking all them findings again, to try and do some more pieces of work within Stainforth. But one of the things what residents were saying was education in schools, that it really needs to start, and obviously we're doing a lot of focus on that young people. We're doing a lot of focus on them ambitions and them opportunities. But again, if this real problem's still here with the drug and the alcohol and the crimes and everything, what's happening, we're sort of masking. We were just putting a bit of a bandage, a bit of a plaster over this, just bringing ambitions in, which it's all good. But if we don't do something at that real core problem, we could put as many ambitions and that many opportunities there. It's not necessarily the children the young people will be aspired to go to something
them opportunities what are available. So we went back again to the substance misuse team, and we spoke to them, and we've asked about doing some sort of education in schools and doing a bit of a pilot within Stainforth. And she's put us on to another person who specialises in the children and young people, and they are now looking at, well, they've got us on a board.
We're going to design a programme to be shared in schools, so that could be a real system change for us, so we're really pleased about that.
And that's what we're really looking at, because like Karen said, we've got loads of little different pockets all over the place. Like last time we were talking to you about the mental health and the GP, and that GP not knowing how to signpost over to areas. So it's finding out that where we fit and where do we fit on that system change. And when we've done obviously the training with the design council of being that connector and being that convener, I feel that that's what my role is, especially, is finding out what is happening within the voices, and then feeding them back to that wider system and to that wider change.
I think a lot of ours has been grabbing any opportunity and then seeing how it develops. We've just had another opportunity where the apprentices were invited to go to a bigger event in Doncaster in the Civic Building to talk about their experiences of being apprenticed to other up and coming who could. And there was another manager there from Doncaster Council. She was manager in the engineering department, and she grabbed me outside and said that she'd been wanting to work with young people to inspire them with engineering. Well, it fit everything that we do. So we've met with her today, and we've got a plan that we're going to get some inspirational sort of training and everything with young people. And again, she's going to use Stainforth as a bit of a pilot area. So I think it's just right place at right time sometimes that we have these conversations. I'm just thinking with young people.
Yeah. So young people, I don't know if we did a bit of a update last time. So young people, so we've got the 3-tier model. So we've got steering group, young people steering group, and then we've got the future generation group, which it's like the young people feed into the future generation, and then we've got the partnership meetings as well, which all three tiers feed into one another. The steering group's going really well at the moment. Grace and Lucy, the apprentice, they've took a real lead on that, where they're it's really developing. They've got a core group of 17 young people what are actively going, and that's every twice a month, where they're feeding back into again that wider system. We have built a really good relationship up with the Parish Town Council, and the Parish Town Council, when we went and updated it, actually it was Grace, what she came with me, and she did an amazing update to the Town Council, and they were inspired that much that they want to do a subcommittee for the young people, for them young people to feed in to the Town Council, which to us that's a real positive stand. Well, where we are at the moment, because I don't know what it's like in other local authorities, but we know within Doncaster Town Council, parish town councils can be quite reluctant to listen and to move forward with time. So we're quite excited about these young people having a voice, and we did actually tell them last week, and they're really excited about going and talking to the mayor and having some real change within their community. And that just keeps getting stronger and stronger. And also there's we're having quite a big investment within Stainforth, which is the Unity project, and that's going to open doors up for more homes, more jobs, and it's going to be like an extension on Stainforth. And me and Karen called into they're going to have an academy, therefore to upskill residents to go on to be working in these different factories or different units, what's going to be happening. And we just called there a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking to the manager from there, and he really wants the young people to come and do a site visit on the area, to focus on their future, because again, we're a bit like Blythe, where we're looking now of that sustainability, but then what we're really, and what we've been focusing on all the way through, right from the beginning, is that long term of getting residents, and not just residents, partners as well, stakeholders, to think what as that long time is what's not just what's happening now, what can we leave behind within 10, 30, 100 years time for our next generation. So this is where we're really working with this young steering group, where we can hopefully achieve that.
So some really strong messages coming about the power of the consultation. People saying they were shocked at some of the things that they were hearing. Early on, and the successful links, route to give young people a voice within the council, I think major successes. And also, it seems the engagement has focused quite a lot, has thrown up this problem of drug and alcohol in particular. And that's prompted some debate in the chat about. So I know you moved quickly to interventions in schools, but Liz and Kate have got some comments and questions. So I might move to Liz and Kate about thinking about how do you go from identification of a problem to then the design of what it is you do in response to it. Liz, I don't know whether you want to start, and then Kate.
Yeah, in my previous role, I was a drug and alcohol commissioner, so this is like brings back memories. Yeah, it's challenging, isn't it? Because in public health we often look at evidence, but evidence might not be of what stage it's like. So you've always got to have that thought in mind that all these studies might not have worked, but there's nothing to say trying it won't work where you are. So you've always got to have that. But it's just the potential unintended consequences. I can remember doing a bit of work looking at this, and from a really good intention was bringing people who are in recovery. So they used to be drug and alcohol users. They're now they turned their lives around. They were everybody knew them in the community as a nightmare, but now they were doing really well. So they went into schools and to talk to kids, which is really good motive. But the effect was kids thought, well, it can't be that bad. You've turned out all right, sort of. Yeah. And it had very and a lot of that's why a lot of drug and alcohol education it's probably gone too far the other way. It's you give the knowledge is there, but it doesn't necessarily mean kids sort of then go, oh, so I won't do it. They just know more about it rather than actually think. So and it's like with a lot of public health sort of behaviors, it's a symptom of something else going on, isn't it? Drug and alcohol is a symptom of the lives people are living. So it's like getting upstream. But I really think the stories of young people saying what that impact has on where they live, and that being reflected back the other way. I wonder if there's any way of doing that it makes us feel how it makes them feel living in that area. But it's a really tricky, real wicked issue.
We just actually, with Task Grace is going to be working with our comms department, and it's a little bit similar, but doing some sort of TikTok filming, and we're going to have a strapline. Oh my goodness! Something like, "Hi, I'm Karen, and I'm changing Stainforth." I'm changing Stainforth because, and giving those positive messages. So she's going to be doing some TikToks, and then because there's a lot of work and investment, we're going to get everybody to say what they're doing, so that people start to feel proud. So it's a little bit similar, and we're going to really promote that on TikTok. We're going to work with the comms department and everything. So should we go into young people and encouraging them to say something on it as well, and getting their messages and their voices on there.
Fantastic. So embracing technology.
We are really early. Yeah.
And Kate, did you want to say something about the drug and alcohol?
Yeah, it was just an observation actually, because I was to a meeting last weekend, and I just got chatting to somebody, and he goes in and he does talks around vaping, which is a really big issue. So that's one of the things I mentioned. But he actually said, I think as well, the thing about vaping is because it's still relatively new, is we don't necessarily know a huge amount about it, and so I think it's about that pitching the information and the support for young people in particular, because it's quite clear that people will go in and they don't really know all there is to know about vaping. And this guy just said, oh, I actually come out having learnt things from the young people about how it works. So I think for me, it was kind of like that kind of, who do you send into the schools that's going to have the biggest impact, and that they're going to sort of have that respect for them? Because there's nothing worse than being preached to by somebody who doesn't really know what's going on. So and I mean, if I can just carry on, just as another point was, I was jotting some of the things you were saying. I was just jotting so many things down, and I think certainly around that sort of element of storytelling, and I know that's something we're looking at in Shropshire, and we're sort of trying to build it into our own work. But we've also been in meetings where someone will share a story, sometimes in the moment, and it's just so powerful. And I think, just to sort of give them that voice. And I think that's really interesting what you said about TikTok is kind of, it's about meeting people on their own turf, isn't it? And kind of using a means that they're going to engage with. And I think that's really good. It made me think of, I don't know if anyone watches Guardians of the Galaxy, the I Am Groot, and at the end it was We Are Groot. And it's that kind of sense of like, we are Stainforth, or, we're all kind of in it together. That kind of sentiment. Sorry, I'm a bit of an Avengers geek, so that was my reference. I just really like that kind of hashtag way of bringing everybody together. I thought that was really lovely. And I think when you mentioned about sorry, I don't want to take too long, but when you talk about the streets, and like you can actually sort of pin it down to certain streets, and we're very aware from our point of view where you can actually look physically at where the poverty ends and starts, and that kind of sense of equality, you can physically see it on a map. And I think that was really interesting what you were saying. And could I ask a quick question? I know you mentioned about your PAG groups, so and we're looking at doing a community group, and I just wondered how you go about facilitating those, if you sort of leave it as an open sort of discussion, or if you do go in with some kind of structure. So just any advice on that would be really useful.
So we go in on a structure, and normally it's facilitated by a Well Done CASA officer, which is obviously myself. We do want to get it to the point where we could get a resident to chair the meeting. That is that long-term vision of really taking ownership of the PAG. But at the moment, we do that facilitation. And what I do, I know we are again very different in all different communities what we are in. But what I do within my communities is always start with a positive. So we do an introduction. We do with what's the reason why you're here, the reason why you sat around this table, and then give me one good positive about Stainforth. I do change the questions every now and again. So if anybody's got any good icebreakers about positivity for a community, please send them my way, because I do run out of them. But it could be, I know that I did it after we did the event last year, and there were quite a few other events. I did say to residents afterwards, give me one good positive thing. So that then started a conversation of that, building strengths, building positivity within the meeting. I did do it once, and it was online, and I did it without doing that icebreaker, and it didn't go down very well. So I'll never do it again. And when I give advice to other officers, I do say, please start off with a positivity, because that gives you a good steadfast rested meeting. And then what I do is I find out what topic, what theme has been either coming up in conversations, or I do ask the group what service would they like to see coming in and speaking to the group, and we generally go off what the conversations have been. So such as obviously the drug and alcohol. Then I advertised it on Facebook of the PAG this month. We've got such and such from different services what come in to really promote. So you do normally get different people coming in. It's not normally the set residents. It depends if that topic is relevant to them or if it takes an interest to them. But then we do have like a core residents what do generally normally come as well. But I have that answer.
Yeah, I think usually anybody who carry house coming in, there is a action on the action plan, isn't there? Like it was drug and alcohol, so it's always relevant. We've had there's a park development, so we had them come and talk about. Or is that next time? We've had them come to talk about the parks anyway and things like that. So it's always like they're always on the action plan.
I love the granularity of the conversation, the detail and how to start a meeting, and also actually like Kate's phrase. Again, one of the themes is meet people on their own turf, whether that be a physical turf, a local building, or an electronic turf, the TikTok. With that sort of that's where people are, isn't it? In different ways, different groups. Again, I think this has been you've all described fantastic stuff. It's been I've really loved the conversation and the granularity and the details of it. Unique things about each places, but also I think some really strong common themes. That this value of engagement, an awful lot of the conversation about the importance of building on the strengths, viewing people as strengths, building what's going well, what you're proud of. It is the that build. Also, the sense that this is hard work. This is real work. It's not soft and fluffy stuff. It's concrete, and it makes a concrete difference. There are real strengths from creating and strengthening relationships. You're building strength, building resilience in places. Actually, ultimately, changing people's lives. I think a couple of times people have referred to the wider determinants of health. I think I'm on a mission to change that phrase and not talk about wider determinants of health, but talk about the core determinants of health. Because I think when people, particularly from the health service, talk about the wider determinants, that means there's something marginal. Whereas actually these things, if you call them about the core, that's actually where health is created, where it's driven, where it's preserved, and also where potentially it's destroyed if people don't pay attention to them. And what I think you're demonstrating is the way in which the system, the state, and individuals actually can engage with people and communities to make a real difference to people's lives. And as I say, it's the detail, it's the granularity of what you're doing, which I think is what we need to be able to distill out and to share. So it seems to me as much about the process as the content, because and that also seems to be the theme, is where you build relationship and build trust. You create a platform where from which people have more agency, greater strength, where they begin building their communities, and you create new platforms where you broaden the topics, you broaden the areas, you broaden the substance which the community can address together with you. So you really becoming important. And I think you're describing being important catalysts in that process. Those are my observations. Others may take different things from it, but that was, I thought, a fantastic conversation from all of you. Just want to say a very big thank you. I don't know if anybody's got any last comments they want to make. We're sort of 1 minute before the end of our time, I think. I think Louisa will summarise. This has all been recorded, and there'll be some summary that goes out. Bless you. And then I really look forward to our next conversation. Louise, I'm going to hand back to you as the sort of the convener of it all.
Perfect. I think you've done the lion's share of the work for me now. Thank you. Just to reiterate, thank you very much to everyone for coming so prepared and engaging so thoughtfully with everyone's contributions today. A big thank you also to Nick and Paul for their really, really vital contributions. And yeah, Nick, you're a real gift for concisely encapsulating a 25-minute conversation in about 45 seconds at the end. It's a real gift. As Nick mentioned, there'll be a note shared in the coming days summarising what's been said from this meeting, as well as the recording, so that if you wish, you can listen back in your own time or share with colleagues via the link to our private YouTube channel. The next Action Learning set is on the 2nd of November, which I'm sure feels like an absolute age away, but as with this one, it'll probably come around sooner than we think. As ever, any feedback on this format, do let us know. This is meant to be obviously a session for you. We want to make sure you get the most value from it possible, so please do let us know. Emily, I can see a hand up. I want to make sure there's time for your question.
Yeah, I just want to say that's half term.
We talked. This is now prompting a memory. I think we mentioned that we would alter it so that it didn't sit in half term. Leave this with me.
I don't know if it's half term in other areas, but it's definitely half term in Shropshire.
Okay. Let me thank you very much for flagging that. I will be in touch to discuss to identify if there's a time when it can fall where it isn't half term for any of you all. But thank you for flagging that, Emily. That's very helpful. Any final points or questions before we finish up for today? Hearing none, wishing you all a lovely rest of your evening. Thank you ever so much again. And yeah, wishing you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You take care.
Thank you.